Hey, welcome to Tabletop Skirmish Games and Battle Report number 4, which will be a pit fight between the Slaves to Darkness, the Lumineth, and the Scions of the Flame. Our battle groups are assembled and we've got Bahana and Miyari, and they're going to be taking the place of the Stone Guard with Stone Mallet for 110 points, and the Sinari Kathala for 125. We've also got the Slaves to Darkness making the most of that full 250 points pit fight allowance, and this is the Exalted Champion leading the way for them. And they're going to be all going up against the Scions of the Flame, and we've got the Blazing Lord at 190 points and the Initiate at 55 points. With the battle groups assembled, ready for the pit fight, we've chosen terrain number 1, and this is from the Tome of Champions 2020 edition, and this sets us up for the terrain we're going to play today, and this all now transfers to the battlefield and we're all ready to go. We've got our deployment zones in place, there's 6 in total, and so now we're going to move on and see who's going to get the initiative to choose where they're going to deploy their fighters. The victory condition today is Champion of Gladiators, and to win the Champion of Gladiators, the players will need to battle off, and a player wins the battle as soon as all of their opponent's fighters have been taken down. And to just add to the excitement and keep things going in the centre of the battlefield, at the end of the first and second battle rounds, fighters within 4 inches of the battle edge are taken down. At the end of the third and subsequent battle rounds, fighters within 6 inches of the battlefield edge are taken down. So it really is all to play for, and our fighters are encouraged to get stuck in and move into the centre of the battlefield to take full advantage, avoid being taken down, and become Champion of Gladiators. Now it's time to determine the priority order, and the players roll off, and we see that it's going to be the Scions of the Flame going first, followed by the Slaves to Darkness, and then the Lumineth. With priority established, it's now time to set up the fighters on the battlefield, and the player who lost the priority order, they're going to set up first, and we see the Lumineth have chosen the central deployment zone, and then the Slaves to Darkness is going right opposite them, followed by finally the Scions of the Flame, who are looking to take an aggressive move right at the beginning of the match, and I suspect they're looking at making a move on the Slaves to Darkness early on in round 1. With our fighters all on the battlefield, let's take a quick look at the battlefield and the placements before we move into the first round. And with the fighters set up, ready for round 1, we can already see the Scions of the Flame here are getting ready to make a move on the Slaves of Darkness, while the Lumineth are kind of hanging back, and they're going to want to move through the gap and get into the battle. So let's get started with round 1 of this first pit fight. And in round 1, it's time to roll for the initiative, and the Scions roll first, and they get a triple, and they get 3 singles. Singles becoming really important in pit fights, as we'll see as the battle moves forward. And the next, it's the Lumineth, who also get a triple, and they get 3 singles. And then finally, the Slaves to Darkness roll, and they've also got a triple and 3 singles. So it'll have to be a roll-off to see who's going to go first, and with a 6, the Lumineth are going to go first, and then a 5, that means the Scions of the Flame will go second, Slaves to Darkness third. Time to apply the wild dice now, and the Lumineth decide to make one of their singles into a double. The Scions of the Flame also make a double, and the Slaves to Darkness opt for a quad, seizing the initiative as we move into the first round, and now a roll-off to see who's going to go second and third. So first, it's going to be Slaves to Darkness, followed by Scions of the Flame, and then the Lumineth. And the Slaves to Darkness kick things off in the first round with a double move, and they can move 8 inches all together in that double movement, and they're positioned nicely, making sure they're well away from the edge of the battlefield and also within range to make an attack. And they're straight in with their quad ability. This allows an extra move and then an extra attack. And so they're going to roll off, but first the Scions make a reaction roll, and on a 4+, they're going to parry, and that's going to subtract 1 from the attack. So this now takes the attacks down to 4 roll, But it's great, it's a really good roll, and straight away we're seeing 11 points of damage inflicted onto our Blazing Champion, ending the round for the Slaves to Darkness. The Scions of the Flame go next, with one movement just to make sure he gets away from that battlefield edge so he doesn't get taken down at the end of the round. Makes an attack on the Slaves to Darkness, who rolls, misses the parry that time, and so with the attack coming in, that's 2 hits, and that's going to put 8 points of damage on our Slaves to Darkness. And the Blazing Lord also decides to use a triple, and he's going to improve some attack characteristics for the initiative for the rest of this battle round. And that ends his activation. It's now the turn of the Lumineth, and let's see who's going to go first here. And they're measuring up, just checking the distance there, and it looks like Miyari's going to take 2 move actions, a full 10 inches, 5 for each move action, and come right around, keeping within cover and out of the fray. And now it's the turn of the Initiate for the Scions of the Flame, who makes a move action, gets within range of the Slaves to Darkness. He's got 3 inches of range there on that weapon, and he's just checking to make sure he finishes his move action well outside that 4-inch range so he doesn't get taken down at the end of the round. And it looks like he's going to use a double to add to his attack's characteristic. And before that attack takes place, our Slaves to Darkness can use a single dice to make a reaction, and he chooses the riposte reaction, and he rolls a dice, and he rolls a 4+, so that's a 6, successfully dealing some damage. And with D3 damage now, that'll go on to the Initiate before the Initiate makes their attack. So that Initiate now takes 2 points of damage and then makes his attack roll. It's a terrible roll. We're only seeing 1 hit now, so only 1 extra wound added to the Slaves of Darkness. That ends the activation for the Initiate, and not a great activation for him, and that leaves Bahana now, who does his double movement, 3 each move action to get up into range for the next round. And at the end of this round, we remove our activation tokens, and let's analyse the board and see just what happened during round 1. And with round 1 complete, we saw a lot of action early on there, with the Lumineth just moving into position. We've got Miyari just hanging back there, keeping her distance, looking to use that triple ability later on. So she'll want to keep 12 inches of distance between herself and Bahana as he starts to advance. And then she can also be within 12-inch range of the enemy here, who will want to move up to get that 4 to 6 inches away from the battlefield edge. We also saw the Slaves to Darkness advance here and getting himself in a nice position away from the edge of the battlefield, and he's looking to be within range to strike at both the opponents of the Scions of the Flame there. He's taken a little bit of damage early on, but he's also dealt a fair bit of damage, with our Brazen Lord taking some damage early on and also inflicting some on the Initiate. So that was a great first round there for the Slaves to Darkness. And let's move on to round 2, where we hope to see the Lumineth getting in on the action too. And starting round 2, we roll for initiative, and the Scions of the Flame go first, and they end up with 2 doubles and 2 singles. And then next, the Lumineth's going to roll, and they get a triple, a double, and a single. And finally, the Slaves to Darkness roll, and they're going to end up with a double, another double, and a third double. So let's see who's got the initiative for the wild dice, and that's going to Scions of the Flame, who make a triple. The Lumineth choose to make another single, and the Slaves to Darkness use their wild dice to make a double into a triple. So now we roll off to see who's going to go first. It's a draw, so we roll off again, and it looks like the Scions of the Flame are going to go first, followed by the Lumineth and then the Slaves to Darkness. And straight away, we're in the action with an attack being made by the Slaves to Darkness, on the Slaves to Darkness by the Scions, and the second action is going to be an attack action too. So we've seen a fair amount of damage now going on. That's 10 points of damage, and that ends the activation for the Scions of the Flame. But just to finish off, he's going to use another triple so he can add to the attacks characteristic of the initiative for the rest of the round. And now the Lumineth activate, and they decide that Bahana's going to go first, and he uses both his actions as move actions, moving 6 inches towards the other fighters, and ends his activation. And the Slaves to Darkness go next, and he puts his attention straight on the Blazing Lord, who rolls to react, uses his single, fails, and now it's an attack from the Slaves to Darkness with 5 dice, and he makes 3 hits there. And is this enough to take down the Blazing Lord? And it is. The Blazing Lord's out of the pit fight. It's game over for him, and he's removed from the battlefield. But our Slaves to Darkness champion has got 1 more attack, and he turns onto the Initiate. The Initiate rolls, and his reaction also fails. And now with 5 attacks, it's a huge roll. 2 crits, 2 hits. That's got to be enough. It's game over from the Initiate too, and he is also removed from the battlefield. And what a great round for the Slaves to Darkness. With only 1 fighter left to activate, it's now Miari's turn, and she's going to use up her movement actions to get close enough to, again, still wanting to use that triple ability, seeing how close she can get, and ends her activation there. And that's the end of round 2. So let's have a quick recap. And round 2 was a complete disaster for the Scions of the Flame, with our Slaves to Darkness champion there dealing some serious damage. We've seen Bahana move up. He's advanced through the gap and got himself just about in range. We'll have to check that on the next round and measure it up. While Miari, again, she's hanging back, keeping within that 12-inch range of both Bahana and the enemy fighter. Still looking to make use of that triple ability, but Bahana hasn't taken any damage points yet, so we'll have to have some damage inflicted on him for Miari to be able to use that ability. The Slaves to Darkness champion really showed his strength there in that round. He's taken a fair bit of damage, but if he can get close enough to attack Bahana, he's going to do well. He's got potential to take him out. Bahana only having 12 wounds there, and then with Miari on 20, there's some options for the Slaves to Darkness to advance on both players. So let's move on to round 3, and it's really going to be important here to see who gets the initiative to go first. Round 3 begins with the Lumineth rolling in the hero phase, and they get 2 doubles and 2 singles. And now the Slaves to Darkness rolls, and what's he going to get? He ends up with a double and 4 singles, really looking for the initiative now. And so he's going to add a wild dice. Let's have a look what they do. So the Lumineth make a triple, and so does the Slaves to Darkness. And the Slaves to Darkness are going to go first, just checking the distance there, making sure he's away from the edge of the battlefield. Now that's moved up to 6 inches for the end of round 3 and rounds 4. And he's just making sure he's well in range for that 2-inch attack as well. And Bahana reacts, and he makes a roll but fails. And then it's a great roll by the Slaves to Darkness, who deals out 16 damage and takes Bahana out. He's out of the battlefield. This guy's having a great battle and ends his activation. Now Miari steps up with her first action as a move and is going to look to use an ability. It's going to be a triple. So it looks like she's using the Onslaught. The Slaves to Darkness rolls a 4, and this was a great roll in reaction. And now that's the riposte. So he's going to add 3 damage points to Miari. So she takes 3 damage points, and then she makes her attack. So let's have a look. Let's see what happens here. Just 1, but it is a critical. So that's a nice 3 points of damage. 4 points of damage going on to the Slaves to Darkness. And that's going to bring us to a swift end to round 3. So we'll have a quick recap before we go into the final round. And at the end of round 3, we've seen the Slaves to Darkness take out Bahana, but he also took some damage too. Miari moved up, and he's there on 23 points of damage versus Miari's just 3 points of damage. The victory conditions were crucial to keep fighters in the battle, having to come in for that 4 to 6 inches from the battlefield edge. Really pushed all the fighters together and has seen some serious action. We're not going to see players moving around too much in these pit fights. It really is a free-for-all, getting close, fight it out, and to win this victory condition, it's basically the last fighter standing. So it really is all to play for now. Both fighters are within range moving into round 4, and so it really is going to be whoever gets the initiative now is going to be in with a chance of winning. So we're taking this right down to the wire. So let's move into round 4 and see who's going to get the initiative in this battle. It's going to be really important now to get the initiative in the final hero phase in round 4. And the Slaves of Darkness get a quad and 2 singles. And the Lumineth, they roll a double and 4 singles. That's a great roll, just what they were looking for. They add a wild dice to make a triple. And the Slaves of Darkness add a single. But it's going to be the Lumineth to go first. And this could be crucial for the win. They use a triple, so they use that ability. And now they've added to their attacks characteristic. Before the attack, the Slaves to Darkness champion decides to roll as a reaction, uses a single dice, and is looking for a grapple. Both players have to get the same roll, so let's see what happens. They both roll, it's a 6 and a 2, and so that fails, and now the Lumineth make their attack. And with a roll, that's a decent roll, got 1 crit and 1 hit, and is that going to be enough to take out this player? 6 points of damage, and he's off the battlefield, and that's game over. The winner is the Lumineth, with Miari taking that final strike. And what a great battle. Brilliant pit fight. We saw the Chaos champion taking out 3 fighters, but Miari stepped up with a sneaky move at the end, and just with that initiative, that all-important initiative roll, managed to snatch victory and become champion of the Gladiators. Even though the Lumineth couldn't get off their abilities and were having to use the universal abilities, they really did well to come into the battle late. They let the Slaves to Darkness do most of the work, getting weakened as he did so, and it just wasn't enough for him to be able to take out all the fighters. But he did a great job eliminating both the Scions of the Flame in just 1 round, taking out Bahana with 1 attack action, and all he had to do to win was to seize the initiative going into round 4, but Miari from the Lumineth beat him to it and proved to be the champion of Gladiators. So that's the end of the first pit fight here on the channel, and it was great fun and a real great opportunity to bring in and try out different fighters from different warbands, and these pit fights being 250 point limits to the amount of fighters you can bring in. They're really good fun. You can have up to 6 players, and it's a real good chance to use some of those miniatures and models from the Underworlds sets. So this is quite fast and furious with 3 warbands, so I'm going to do some more of these pit fights real soon and practice a little bit more. So, lots of improvements to be made here. But if you've seen any errors I've made, please let me know in the comment section below, and also join in with any feedbacks or thoughts or questions you've got. It'd be great to hear from you. You can find all the rules for pit fights in the Tome of Champions 2020 edition, starting on page 10. As this was the first pit fight, I was still trying to get used to it, so what I didn't include was the random event table, and this is a real good way to add some extra things like beasts and the crowd, really influencing the battles, and so in the next pit fight, I'll make sure to include that. I'll be making another video really soon about the rules for the pit fights, and we'll go through all the rules in detail, much like I've done with the How to Play Warcry series and the campaign series. So if you're interested in pit fights, look out for that video coming soon. If you like this content and would like to support the channel, then please check out my Patreon page. It's a great place where we hang out in Discord, chat about the hobby, share our ideas, what we're working on, help each other out. It's a real great community, and you can also pick up some content there that you're not going to find anywhere else. So I'll put a link to that in the description below, and it'd be awesome to see you there. Thanks so much for watching. Please like if you like it, subscribe for more videos like this, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to join me next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games.